Okay, Rabbi David. Was machst du?
Pretty good. Pretty good for an old rabbi.
An old rabbi doing good work. You're not old rabbi. I'm just doing good work. Yeah. You feel like an old rabbi?
At times I do it, but at times I'm grateful for that because I feel like in some ways the world was so much kinder when I was young that it's not so bad to be old, you know?
Does it give you a particular perch to for which to look at things?
Yes, I actually, at least for me, it makes me more optimistic. For some people, not, but for me, it does because I've lived long enough to know that we always extrapolate from what is happening now, and things always change, usually in directions we can't expect or anticipate. And so I know that it is possible that things will get much better. It's also possible they'll get worse, but
Yeah.
I'm an optimist by nature.
That's very optimistic of you.
Yes,
That's great.
it's true.
Yeah.
It's very un-Jewish, but I am.
Is it really? Tell me, are Jews preternaturally pessimistic?
So, I mean, I think you could argue it both ways. Abba Eban used to like to say that Jews like their clouds without silver linings. So I think fundamentally Judaism is a hopeful tradition. That's why, the coming of the Messiah is a hopeful idea. But there is a lot of doom and gloom along the way. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. Well, we're in some doom and gloom now. So like we're not gonna put any silver linings on our clouds right now because we're in the midst of it. Like we're like in the heart of what I've said, and I think others would agree. I don't know if you would agree with this statement, but I think for me personally, this is as bad as I remember it ever being in terms of anti-Semitism or the sense of things moving in a direction of. I mean, there's so much fear, moving in the direction of fear, moving in the direction of being scapegoated. The sense that, like, in every way, shape, and form, we are now being closed in by the horseshoe of anti-Semitism to the right and the left. And so I'm kind of like we're in the middle of this moment here, and catching you with like your thoughts on where we are in terms of the Jewish community in North America.
Okay.
What you're witnessing on the ground. I think that I think and I think you've heard me have this conversation with a colleague of ours about prophetic asymmetry, that there's a sense that a lot of Jews who are liberal and progressive, or Jews who would identify as liberal and progressive, find ourselves prophetically calling out Israel and calling out the Jewish state at this moment in ways that are asymmetric to the broader dangers that face the Jewish community writ large. What are you thinking right now, David, about where we are?
So I'll start by giving you my optimistic read long term, which is it's true. This is the worst that I remember in my lifetime. But all I would have to do is turn to the lifetime of my parents or grandparents, and they would say, the fact that you have an Israel and the fact that you have such sway in America, that you have a voice, it's been a lot worse. And for those of us in America, I think when we look to Europe, it's a lot worse in Europe. So I don't want to catastrophize. I think it is bad, and there are warning signs that it could get worse. But we certainly have been in worse positions in the past. And yes, I think that there is an asymmetry, just as you identify. And part of the problem that we're having is that if you look selectively, if you're already predisposed to find stuff that's bad in Israel and ignore the depredations of its enemies, which are infinitely greater worldwide, but let's just say, unfortunately, Israel is giving you lots of ammunition. That is, this is an Israel that it is easy, if you're predisposed to be critical of it, gives you things to be critical of. And so it is impossible to say in response No, 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 you're totally misunderstanding. They're all fine and everything's good. Instead, you are forced to say, yeah, there are things that trouble me too, but like get some perspective. I mean, yes, it is difficult to be in a neighborhood for now 78 years where so many people hate you and want to destroy you, and weapons are getting more sophisticated, and huge powers are arrayed against you, because, after all, behind some of Israel's enemies are Russia and China. So that's what I think you were saying in that discussion that you alluded to, and I thought you were 100% right, and that you said it eloquently. Um,
Thank you.
and I think it's important for people to recognize and to know.
So where is the line? So like this kind of just raises, asymmetry raises the question of obligation and responsibility within a moral framework to be able to name some of the injustices or
Mhm.
be critical of the state. People use
Right.
that language, but what I'm worried about, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, is like more often than not when I read things that are critical of Israel at this moment, especially from within the Jewish camp. There was another article that a prominent rabbi wrote and a prominent academic, posted it, and in which this prominent rabbi was pushing back against the piece in Haaretz, and the piece in Haaretz was writing about internalized shame and internalized, the internalized diasporic mentality where we're always fawning and always looking over the shoulder to worry if we will be received or not, and that is such a heavy motivator for Jews who grew up as the minority, constantly thinking about their own survival. Part of what we do as a survival, I think, is to to not commit the worst sin of liberal progressive circles, which is to be tribal. So we
Mhm.
kind of showcase our ability not to be tribal by punching at our own community, right? So I wonder about that. If that is true, I don't know if you agree with that, but if that is true, then how do we ever know if we're lodging a legitimate complaint, or are there times when no matter what we say, it will be weaponized, and so we shouldn't be criticizing publicly? Like, how do you think about that in helping us navigate the thorny area there?
It's what I would say is, that when I was growing up, the line was, you don't criticize Israel because if you're wrong, you don't pay the price. And that's still true. I mean, it's not that that is no longer true. I tell the story, just for people who don't really understand what it is to pay the price. I tell the story of being in Israel and sitting with two people, at least one of whom you know, maybe both, Mati Friedman and Evan Fallenberg, who's a writer and a translator. And Evan said to us, Evan's son was serving in Gaza at the time. He said, a lot of my friends have a sign on their door, and the sign says, "Do not knock," because they know what a knock means. They know what it means. And so you can text me first and tell me you're coming over. You can call me, but I don't want to hear a knock. And I say to people, imagine being a parent who for 24 hours a day lives in dread of hearing a knock at your door. So I understand why somebody who lives that way and hears me say, it's terrible what those settlers are doing, or it's awful that this IDF soldier took an axe to a statue of Jesus. And I think it is awful. But the question is that what I should be focusing on and telling people about? Because I feel as though it's a certain kind of virtue signaling. It's a certain way of saying, look, I'm as morally pure as the next person. When in fact, um, the truth is, it's not my price that will be paid, and so it's very hard for me to make those criticisms. So if asked, I will respond, but I think it's much more important to persuade people of what it is that Israel faces than what it is that Israel does.
Yes. I very much resonates with me. I've been saying since the beginning of this current war that I feel my job is I'm also in America is I'm also deployed. Like I've also been deployed, and part of my job is to make sure that nothing I do leads to, um, God forbid, to danger for my
Right.
Israeli brothers and sisters. But I also am wondering how true what you started off with, that great story about not wanting to endanger, right? Like make sure that what you say doesn't endanger. It's great you can say it, but if it endangers Israel, but at this moment also, how much should we be concerned about how much it's endangering us as well? Because like the sense that sometimes people think that if they are critical of Israel, it lends credibility to their ability then to kind of enter into conversations here in the diaspora. Like, let me show, sure, in Israel, you have plenty of people who are arguing or fighting or being critical of the government and its policies or protesting, whatever it is, which is certainly true. And then people here in the diaspora will say, well, I have an obligation to call it out. But not only that, I have an instrumental need to do that because it then gives me greater, credibility. And I
Right.
wonder about that statement and the truth of that, because I think my experience is that it contributes to a tsunami of ill will towards the Jewish state and towards Israel and those who support it. And so it actually doesn't just affect the Iron Dome votes, which we knew it was going to affect at some
Right.
point, but it participates in this kind of the zeitgeist, like
Right.
the permission giving to like
Yes.
hunt Jews, hunt Israelis, hunt Zionists.
I think that that's true, and that is the situation we're in when what it allows is for people to say, "Look, even Ingber said." Even Ingber, and you know that he loves Israel and this and that, and even he said that what they're doing there. So I do agree that it depends what your purpose is. Um, if your purpose is to I don't know, to change Israeli behavior, I don't think that that's an effective way to do it. So,
Yeah, this is where we are. It's the as a Jew phenomena, as
yes,
we know Sarah Horowitz.
exactly.
We're familiar with her, and the
Yeah,
as a Jewism. I think that when we woke up in the aftermath of October 7th, and we saw what was happening amongst our allies or amongst those who we had marched with and those who we had protested with, I think all of us were deeply disillusioned and confused and angry and had felt hoodwinked. Like, so you signed on to this um, Harvard's anti-Semitism committee. I'm sorry,
right.
you resigned. You were on
Yes,
that
I was
committee,
on
right?
that,
And
and
so
then I resigned. Right.
and then you resigned, right? Progressive allies,
Mhm.
were rationalizing the worst massacre of Jews,
Right.
and here you are trying to understand how the soil of American universities, and Harvard being the exemplar of that, we're creating like a pipeline for anti-Israelism and by extension
Right.
anti-Semitism. Can you talk to that a little bit now? I mean, you just saw the Yale that study that just came out about Yale. That Yale did a study
Yeah.
about universities and
Right.
found out that places like Yale were the problem with Yale. Like,
Yes, exactly. Which was no surprise to anybody who looked honestly at what was going on at Harvard. That Harvard was the problem. Um, the the from the perspective now of a couple of years later, I would say first of all that it was clear now that I was never no one on that committee was ever going to make the slightest bit of difference. And in fact, after I resigned, they sort of silently abandoned the committee, um, and that Harvard did not begin to understand its own issues. It really didn't, because as soon as the sort of storm seemed to be dying down, once Claudine Gay resigned, then they made these sort of very slight gestures, but also continued to hire faculty who were explicitly anti-Israel to teach Jewish studies. So they did not make the connection that we were all begging them to make. Um, they certainly, and I think it's because it was so ingrained and so. Um, in fact, I had people there who undergraduates who said to me, "What were you so surprised about with that explosion on October? I could have predicted this. I mean, I know that like I don't face anti-Semitism on campus in the sense that if you walk across campus with a kippah, people don't spit at you or yell at you. There was very little. There was some of that, but there was very little of that. But you can sit in a classroom and hear how Israelis are murderers and child killers like all the time in one way or another. So I think that the rootedness of this ideology um, took me by surprise, and what we've seen now is that it is just growing by leaps and bounds.
So, was your awakening? Because I'm having an awakening, such a profound awakening in the last 3.5 years, and it started before that. But my awakening, um, has been to the almost unique mutation that is anti-Zionist anti-Semitism, and that like it isn't exactly like anything else that has come before, and that sometimes we in the Jewish community will preface a statement about criticizing Israel with this kind of qualifier, like it's okay to criticize the government, but when you call for the state of Israel to be eradicated or the erasure or these kind of like we read these preambles as a kind of hey, let me at least say what I'm about to say, and then we launch into um, anti-Zionism sure has the hallmarks of a hate movement at this point. Are you like that's my burgeoning realization, which is it feels to me sui generis. It feels to me that um, we in the Jewish community have failed to fully recognize its contours and its features, and we sometimes we kind of pussyfooted around this because we didn't really want to throw a whole host of really good human beings that we know were
Right.
Jews into the call them anti-Semites,
Right.
and so we'll often say, well, definitionally you can be anti-Zionist without it really being anti-Semitic because you're just against the state or whatever it might be. But I no longer, at this point, believe that to be true in this moment, right? It might be that someone pre 1948 or pre state wasn't in at the summit, but
Right.
but I do feel deeply now that this is a unique expression of the lie that the Jew is to blame for whatever society thinks is its deepest fear or its deepest aversion. So I don't know where you are on that continuum. I mean, I don't mean to.
I know. I mean, I'm
How do you
happy
feel
to.
about that?
I also I think I think I thought of people who are anti-Zionist before October 7th um, as aberrant, misguided, sometimes animated by hate, especially if they grew up in countries where anti-Semitism was rife. Um, but I didn't make the automatic equation, and now I don't make the automatic 100% equation. What I tell people is it is theoretically possible to be anti-Zionist without being anti-Semitic, but the overlap of the Venn diagram is so great that I think it's not a bad presumption to make about somebody, especially somebody. Now, the reason I say that it's not automatically the case is because I can easily see, like, I mean, a freshman goes to University X and everybody tells them how terrible Israel is. And I tell Jewish audiences all the time, like, how much do you know about Kashmir or Nagorno Karabakh? Two of the hot points that could start a nuclear conflagration in the world, and you know almost nothing about them. So, why do you assume that everybody understands the Middle East conflict? In fact, most people don't. And this kid can come and learn that Israel's terrible and say, oh, Israel's terrible and there shouldn't be an Israel, and not have any particular feeling about Jews one way or the other, and they can be Jewish themselves. So I don't want to say automatically that's so. A lot of it can be attributed to ignorance, but a lot of it, too much of it is malice. And when you tell people, I mean, I've had this experience over and over again. I remember I had early on, unpleasantly, I had a debate with Gabor Mate. And in the middle of it, I said to him, if tomorrow the Palestinians had the firepower of the Israelis, and the Israelis had the firepower of the Palestinians. What do you think would happen to all the Jews in Israel? And the question surprisingly seemed to stun him. And he waited for a minute and then he said, I think that question might be racist. And I thought, if that's your answer, you've just answered my question. Because if you believe the way you think you believe, then you should say, oh, they would be fine and they would live in one peaceful democratic state. But of course, you know that's not true. So knowing that isn't true and you're calling for the destruction of Israel, what are you saying?
So it's so fascinating that you said that, David, like I was watching a clip between, I think it was Bill Maher, who had this woman, I think her name is Anna Kasparian or Ann Kasparian. She's, I think, a Young Turk or something.
Yeah.
And she's so intensely anti-Israel and anti-Semitic. It's just, and she was wearing like a dress that was, a sleeveless dress, and she was dressed like, I guess, like any woman can dress in the West or whatever, wherever you want. She's, she dressed normally, and he said to her, like, where would you, if you could, like, hypothetically, if you could live anywhere in the Middle East, where would you live? Like, let's just go through this. And the question was so good because it cut through so much of what's happening in terms of Israel being clearly the most Western, the most democratic, the most the place where anybody would want to live if they were gay or they were, and even if you're Palestinian, probably better to live there than to live in anywhere else, probably in many ways. And he's cutting through all of these arguments with just like a civilizational or like where we are in the center of gravity of that particular society or culture in terms of their memes, their value memes, what their highest values are, without saying why it is that way. Like, we're not going to essentialize it as it must be so if you're Palestinian. No, of course, but they were not on level playing ground. And yet Israel, I don't know how you think about this, but Micha Goodman has once said to me in the beginning, the philosopher from Israel, I'm sure you know Micha.
Sure.
So Micha said to me at one point, Israel can't win because Israel needs the West to love it and the East to fear it.
Right.
And that was a very pithy way of talking about this. This kind of.
No, I remember I once asked it was the same response an Israeli general about the whole question about PR. And he said that's the problem, is what the West wants us to say is not productive in terms of our neighborhood. And in our neighborhood, we have to say, if you mess with us, we'll kill you. And that does not go over well in Scarsdale.
No.
So, not to pick on Scarsdale, it doesn't go over well on the west side of LA. Okay. It's very hard. And this is why, to some extent, I do think that anti-Zionism is what's called in a different context, a luxury belief. That is, this is a belief that I can have because it doesn't really affect me. It doesn't change who I am or what I do. And it just, it enables me to morally preen with no effect and no, and no downside.
Yeah. So this leads me to like our mutual friend, Rabbi Danny Gorder. So Danny Gorder wrote, he's speaking a lot these days about the growing rift between American Jews and Israelis. We're living in different universes and politically, religiously, all of these different things. Interestingly enough, I think Rachel Goldberg-Pollan, of all people, has been a remarkable bridge between these two universes as an American and as a.
Well, we think so, but I wonder how many people who are not Jewish are listening to her. I don't know.
It's also, I'm wondering. Yeah, I'm reading some of the comments too. Like, I can't believe some of the comments, but I think. Good question. Let's just hold that out.
Yeah.
But from American Jews, though, at least, she becomes a bit of an avatar because she has paid the ultimate price. She speaks in our language. Yep. She is highly sympathetic, and she's actually not weighing in, frankly, on the political elements of this. Smartly, understandably. But where do you, like, when Danny starts to talk this way, and you've been a leading voice of the American rabbinate for decades, like, where do you think, it's not a new problem.
No,
but it feels like it's intensified in a way that feels very like it's pre-schism. What do you think?
I think like most why questions, it's overdetermined. It has to do partly with the fact that Israel is increasingly a Middle Eastern country, and that it's that its Sephardic character and Middle Eastern character is much more pronounced than it was when it was first founded, and it's sort of becoming Israel more. It's becoming itself more, but that means that it's not, again, the West Side of Los Angeles, and I think the generation that goes there and expects bagels and gefilte fish is going to be deeply disappointed. And the kind of religious pluralism that we have here does not yet exist there. And that's very troubling to Americans who value that. I think that there are reasons why that's so, but we can leave that aside for the moment. But as a result,
But
yeah, that difference is going to grow.
so A, the difference is going to grow, and is there anything we can do about it? And B, I heard you. I don't know where I saw. I might have seen this today,
Yeah.
where somebody quoted you, and in his podcast about something that you were saying about progressives always needing to be disappointed or needing to
Right.
fail.
Oh yeah.
Like, and
Right.
so,
I
so
said,
I,
yeah.
I want you to speak to that, but then I want you to ask you. Okay, tell us
The
what that
point was
meant.
just, if you're an activist and you win, then you have to find another cause, a further cause,
Right.
because otherwise you've lost your purpose and you've already institutionalized and you've raised money and you've gotten other people around you and so on. And once the Messiah comes, David, you and I are out of business.
Yeah, we're
So
done.
it's like, he can wait I just have one more, I have a really good program coming up. Like, let him just wait, the Messiah, till after this program. And so I think that this is a driver of extremism because you need another cause.
So I'm wondering about applying that to like American liberal disappointment, activism vis-a-vis the state of Israel. Like, is there something that drives the American liberal Jewish community to um, to be invested in critique of Israel because of their own cause? Meaning, they do want to see a bagel unlocks Israel. They do want to see a plural. They have their own agenda, which is to
Right.
see an Israel that where they are fully welcomed as pluralists, or that value, of course, is seen as a universal, and I agree with it. But like, there's something about the importing and the invitation to American liberals to be critical of the state of Israel sometimes, that is to serve the American liberal project. Like,
Yes.
we're going to come in and tell the world about how Israel is not as great as it is, only because we are angry at it because it continues to leave us out. Like, there's something,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's related to what you were saying, but it
I
just
think
struck me.
there is a disappointed lover syndrome with a lot of American Jews and Israel, no question. And I think also they don't realize the extent to which Israelis feel, I think legitimately so, like, do you realize how much you are not a part of us? How you don't speak our language and you don't face our dangers and you don't, some of you have our backs. And so I think that the American Jews who travel often to Israel, who speak Hebrew, who follow the Israeli press, they don't feel as much estrangement. But if you don't know the culture and you don't know the people, if when you go to Israel, the only people you associate with are Americans. So yeah, there's a self-created estrangement as well as an estrangement that comes from Israel that is quite natural. And it takes work. Relationships take work. So you have to understand the other and seek the other. And I think October 7th made it better and worse. I think a lot of Jews woke up to their relationship to Israel in a way they never had. And a lot of Israelis realized that the diaspora is not as separate from them as they thought. But it also created some rifts.
Is it fixable? Is the bridge?
It's like most relationships. It'll take steps forward and steps back. We're in a particular period when the tumult dies down, and it will at some point in one way or another die down, and other crises predominate, which was starting a little bit to happen before Iran and Lebanon. But Iran and Lebanon will not go on forever. So then we'll see it's much better, it's much better to heal after the surgery is over. And right now we're in the middle of the operation. So I think we have to wait.
So where are we now in terms of the next generation? Like Dara Horn
Yeah.
has, called the Jewish civilizational story about,
Yeah.
the greatest story, what we owe the next generation
Right.
beyond Holocaust education and awareness of
Yeah.
anti-Semitism, what the positive,
Right.
like what David Hartman called Sinai versus Auschwitz. We need a lot more Sinai. The American Jewish establishment has failed a generation in reducing Judaism to Tikkun Olam. I think we both agree on that.
Yes.
What do young Jews need to know next, and how do we reach them? Can we reach them?
It's not easy at the moment because it's not just that the established Jewish community feels foreign and alien to them. Institutional life in general feels foreign and alien to them. And I think to some extent, outside of the Orthodox community, you're going to have some sort of reinvention of Jewish life to reach younger people. They are not going to listen to rabbis speaking from fixed pews in big synagogues anymore. It doesn't have the cachet that it once did. So how that will work, I don't know. One of the things that I am reasonably convinced of is that the solution to how to engage young people will have to come from young people. For me to tell you what the solution is, I can imagine if I were 20 years old, I'd look at me and say, what do you know? You grew up in a totally different world, and that 20-year-old would be right. So I think that we do have, and what we're incredibly blessed with, is a coterie of passionate and smart and able young people who really care about Israel, about Judaism, about tradition, about Torah, and I look to them to be able to touch strings that we can't.
When some people diagnose the current, I guess, antipathy of young folks to Israel, or the upsurge of anti-Zionism or critique of Israel or walking away from Israel, they will often cite, and one of our colleagues did this in a conversation with me, that we drove young Jews away because we were too defensive in the establishment about Israel. I kind of think that any accommodation to that kind of anti-Zionism was itself fatal. I think that part of the diagnosis is the accommodation to it, not the opposite, which was the unwillingness to go there. But I don't know where you land on that.
I will say this.
How do you respond to that?
I'll say that, we did paint too perfect a picture of what Israel was. And we were not willing to acknowledge. We would say Israel's not perfect, but thereby vitiating all of its flaws. And so I think for some young people, they confused disillusion with truth. They were disillusioned by, this isn't a perfect Israel, so it must be terrible. It's just like the way I compare it is like with adolescents and their parents. Once they discover their parents aren't perfect, their parents must be terrible. But I'm hopeful that some people will grow out of that, because when you become old enough, you recognize, no, actually what my parents are human beings. And we have to be willing to talk about Israel like a country of human beings that does sometimes truly terrible, awful things, cruel things, tragic things. And on the whole, at the same time, is miraculous and wonderful and astonishing and worthy of our love.
So with that, with like the painting of the picture of the more mature mind, like the maturity to be able to hold both the light and the dark, or the shadow and the light of parents, of countries, of relationships. Let's talk a little bit, like briefly though, about liberalism itself and where we are. Like a lot of us were terrified in the aftermath of October 7th. We saw kind of shifting in the terrain and the ground beneath us moving. There was a sense that one day there might be a Democratic Party that is no longer hospitable to Jews who are Zionists or those who see the state of Israel as a core piece of their Jewish identity. Liberalism itself maybe showed its limits on October 7th or in its aftermath. What say you around the future of liberalism and the reckoning that it has to have with power?
Classical liberalism is fine. I think the left liberal project in America and Europe is right now has gone off a cliff and needs desperately to be reclaimed. This is early on, like, I don't know, 40 years ago, more probably. I registered as an independent and have never changed that registration.
Really?
Yes. And these days I do not regret it. I do not regret it.
It's looking I mean, Mamdani here in New York and I think.
Yep. This will require another podcast where we'll have to unravel the.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Well, what's giving you hope? Okay, so let's come to a close. What's giving you hope these days, David? Like you've got wisdom. You've got so much insight. I'm listening to you. I'm watching you.
My biggest source of hope is the Jewish past. Is knowing where we've come from. Is knowing what we faced before. Is knowing what our ancestors faced, and knowing the tools and gifts of our people, which are astonishing and world-shattering. And remembering how easily things changed, that the day before the Soviet Union collapsed, no one knew who was going to collapse. And I am fundamentally hopeful in the survival and resilience of the Jewish people, based both on history and on faith.
Well, it's nice to hear that the future of hope is in the past. It's really it's a great way to think about it. We've been here before.
Well, yeah.
We're familiar with the terrain, and so that should give us some sense of confidence going forward. Well, this is the first of what I hope are many conversations between the two of us.
It's a great pleasure as always, and great to see you.